We denounce the imposition upon the working classes of England, and we do well. But in England, this trucking system is abolished by law. It is a penal offense there, and it should be made so here. It should be made a crime to pay any man for his honest labor in any other than honest money. Until this is done in the southern states, the laborer of the South will be ground to the earth, and progress with him will be impossible. It is the duty of the Negro press to take up the subject. The Negro, where he may have a vote, should vote for no man who is not in favor of making this scrip and truck system unlawful. I come now to another feature of Southern policy, which bears hard and heavily on the Negro laborer and land renter. It is found in the landlord and tenant laws. I will read an extract to you from these laws that you may see how completely and rigidly the rights of the landlord are guarded, and how entirely the tenant is in the clutches of the landlord. Revised Code of Mississippi, Section 1301. Every lessor of land shall have a lien on all the agricultural products of the leased premises, however and by whomsoever produced, to secure the payment of the rent and the market value of all advances made to him to his tenant for supplies for the tenant and others for whom he may contract. Section 1304. When any landlord or lessor shall have just cause to suspect, and shall verily believe that his tenant will remove his effects from the leased premises to any other place within or without the county before the rent or claims for supplies will fall due, so that no distress can be made, such landlord or lessor, on making oath thereof, and of the amount the tenant is to pay, and at what time the same will fall due, and giving a bond as required in the preceding section, may in like manner obtain an attachment against the goods and chattels of such tenant. And the officers making the distress shall give notice thereof, and advertise the property distrained for sale, in the manner directed in the last preceding section, and if such tenant shall not, before the time appointed for such sale, give bond with sufficient security in double the amount of the rent, or other demand payable to the plaintiff, condition for the payment of said rent or other thing at that time, it shall be due with all costs of the goods distrained, or so much thereof as shall be necessary, shall be sold by the said officer at public sale to the highest bidder for cash, and out of the proceeds of the sale he shall pay to the plaintiff the amount due him, deducting interest for the time until the same shall become payable. Section 1361. Said lien shall exist by virtue of the relation of the parties as employer and employee, and without any writing or recording. Section 1362 provides that any person who aids or assists in removing anything subject to these liens without the consent of the landlord shall, upon conviction, be punished by a fine of not more than $500, and be imprisoned in the county jail not more than 6 months, or by either such fine and imprisonment. Voorhees Revised Laws of LA 2D, Section 2165. Article 287 shall be so amended that a lessor may obtain a writ of provisional seizure, even before the rent is due, and it shall be sufficient to entitle the lessor to the writ to swear to the amount which he claims, whether due or not due, and that he has good reasons to believe that the lessee will remove the furniture or property upon which he has a lien or privilege out of the premises, and that he may therefore be deprived of his lien. Laws of Florida, McClellan's Digest, Section 1, Chapter 137. All claims for rent shall be a lien on agricultural products raised on the land rented, and shall be superior to all other liens and claims, though of older date, and also a superior lien on all other property of the lessee or his sublessee, or assigns usually kept on the premises, over any lien acquired subsequently to such property having been bought on the premises leased. Code of Alabama, Section 3055, Chapter 6. Lien continues and attaches to crop of succeeding years. When the tenant fails to pay any part of such rent or advances and continues his tenancy under the same landlord for the next succeeding year, for which the original lien for advances, if any remain unpaid, shall continue on the articles advanced or property purchased, with money advanced or obtained by barter in exchange for articles advanced, and for which a lien shall also attach to the crop of such succeeding year. You have thus seen a specimen, and a fair specimen, of the landlord and tenant laws of several of the old slave states. You have thus seen how scrupulously and rigidly the rights of the landlords are guarded and protected by these laws. You have thus seen how completely the tenant is put at the mercy of the landlord. You have thus seen the bias, the motive, and intention of the legislators by whom these laws have been enacted, and by whom they have been administered. And now you are only to remember the sentiment in regard to the Negro, peculiar to the people of the South, and the character of the people against whom these laws are to be enforced, and the fact that no people are better than their laws, to have a perfectly just view of the whole situation. To my mind, these landlord and tenant laws are a disgrace and a scandal to American civilization. A more skillfully contrived device than these laws to crush out all aspiration, all hope of progress in the landless Negro, could not be well devised. They sound to me like the grating hinges of a slave prison. They read like the inhuman bond of Shylock, stipulating for his pound of flesh. They environ the helpless Negro, like the devilfish of Victor Hugo, and draw the blood from every pore. He may writhe and twist and strain every muscle, but he is held and firmly bound in a strong, remorseless, and deadly grip, a grasp from which only death can free him. Floods may rise, droughts may scorch, the elements may destroy his crops, famine may come, but whatever else may happen, the greedy landlord must have from his tenant the utmost farthing. Like the den of the lion, all toes in its path turn inward. The case is aggravated, and when you think of the illiteracy and ignorance of the people who sign land leases, they are ignorant of the terms of the contract, ignorant of the requirements of the law, and are thus absolutely in the power of the landholder. You have heard much, read much, and thought much of the flagrant injustice, the monstrous cruelty and oppression inflicted on the tenant class in Ireland. I have no disposition to underrate the hardships of that class. On the contrary, I deplore them. But knowing them as I do, and deploring them as I do, I declare to you that the condition of the Irish tenant is merciful, tender, and just, as compared with the American freedman. There are thousands in Ireland today who fix the price of their own rent, and thousands more for whom the government itself measures the amount of rent to be paid. And not by the greed of the landlord, but by the actual value of the land and its productions, and by the ability of the tenant to pay. But how is it with us? The tenant is left in the clutches of the landlord. No third party intervenes between the greed and power of one and the helplessness of the other. The landlord imposes his price, exacts his conditions, and the landless Negro must comply or starve. It is impossible to conceive of conditions more unfavorable to the welfare and prosperity of the laborer. It is often said that the law is merciful. There is no mercy in this law. Now, let us sum up some of the points in the situation of the freedman. You will have seen how he is paid for his labor, how a full-grown man gets only $8 a month for his labor, out of which he has to feed, clothe, and educate his children. You have seen how even this sum is reduced by the infamous truck system of payment. You have seen how easily he may be charged with 1/3 more than the value of the goods that he buys. You have seen how easily he may be compelled to receive the poorest commodities at the highest prices. You've seen how he is never allowed to see or handle a dollar. You have seen how impossible it is for him to accumulate money or property. You've seen how completely he has changed the locality in which he lives. You have seen, therefore, that having no money, he cannot travel or go anywhere to better his condition. You have seen by these laws that even on the premises which he rents, he can own nothing, possess nothing. You have seen that he cannot sell a sheep or a pig or even a chicken without the consent of the landlord, whose claim to all he has is superior and paramount to all other claims whatsoever. You have seen all this and more, and I ask, in view of it all, how, in the name of human reason, could the Negro be expected to rise higher on the scale of morals, manner, religion, and civilization than he has done during the 20 years of his freedom? Shame, eternal shame, on those writers and speakers who taunt, denounce, and disparage the Negro because he is today found in poverty, rags, and wretchedness. But again, let us see what are the relations subsisting between the Negro and the state and national governments. What support, what assistance he has received from either of them. To take his relation to the national government, and we shall find him a deserted, a defrauded, a swindled, and an outcast man. In law, free, in fact, a slave. In law, a citizen, in fact, an alien. In fact, in law, voter, in fact, a disenfranchised man. In law, his color is no crime. In fact, his color exposes him to be treated as a criminal. Toward him, every attribute of a just government is contradicted. For him, it is not a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Toward him, it abandons the beneficent character of a government and all that gives a government the right to exist. The true object for which governments are ordained among men is to protect the weak against the encroachments of the strong, to hold its strong arm of justice over all the civil relations of its citizens, and to see that all have an equal chance in the race of life. Now, in the case of the Negro citizen, our national government does precisely the reverse of all this. Instead of protecting the weak against the encroachments of the strong, it tacitly protects the strong in its encroachments upon the weak. When the colored citizens of the South point to the 14th and 15th Amendments of the Constitution for the protection of their civil and political rights, the Supreme Court of the United States turns them out of court and tells them that they must look for justice at the hands of the states, well knowing that those states are, in effect, the very parties that deny them justice. Thus is the Negro citizen swindled. The government professes to give him citizenship and silently permits him to be divested of every attribute of citizenship, and demands allegiance, but denies protection. It taxes him as a citizen in peace, and compels him to bear arms and meet bullets in war. It imposes upon him all the burdens of citizenship, and withholds from him all its benefits. I know it's said that the general government is a government of limited powers. It is also once said that the national government could not coerce a state, and it is generally said that this and that public measure is unconstitutional. But whenever an administration has the bad will to do anything, it has generally found constitutional power to do it. If the general government had the power to make black men citizens, it has the power to protect them in that citizenship. If it had the right to make them voters, it has the right to protect them in the exercise of the elective franchise. If it has this right and refuses to exercise it, it is a traitor to the citizen. If it has not this right, it is destitute of the fundamental quality of a government, and ought to be hissed and hurried out of the sisterhood of government, a usurper, a sham, a delusion, and a snare. On the other hand, if the fault is not in the structure of the government, but in the treachery and indifference of those who administer it, the American people owe it to themselves, owe it to the world, and to the Negro, to sweep from place and power those who are thus derelict in the discharge of their place in the government, who will not enforce the constitutional right of every class of American citizen. I'm a Republican. I believe in the Republican Party. My political hopes for the future of the colored people are enforced in the character and composition, in the wisdom and justice, and the courage and fidelity of the Republican Party. I am unable to see how any honest and intelligent colored man can be a Democrat or play fast and loose between the two parties. But while I am a Republican and believe in the party, I dare to tell that party the truth. In my judgment, it can no longer repose on the history of its grand and magnificent achievements. It must not only stand abreast with the times, but it must create the times. Its power and greatness consisted in this at the beginning. It was in advance of the times and made the times when it abolished the slave trade between the states, when it emancipated the slaves of the District of Columbia, when it stemmed the bloody tide of disunion, when it abolished slavery in all the states, when it made the Negro a soldier and a citizen, when it conceded to him the elective franchise, and now, in my judgment, the strength, success, and glory of the Republican Party will be found in its holding this advanced position. It must not stand still or take any step backward. Its mission is to lead, not to follow, to make circumstances, not to be made by them. It is held and firmly bound by every sentiment of justice and honor to make a living fact out of the dead letter of the constitutional amendments. It must make the path of the black citizen to the ballot box as safe and smooth as that of the white citizen. It must make it impossible for a man like James Russell Lowell to say he sees no difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. If it fails to do all this, I, for one, shall welcome the bolt, which shall scatter it into 1,000 fragments. The supreme movement in the life of the Republican Party is at hand. The question, to be or not to be, will be decided at Chicago, and I reverently trust in God that it may be decided rightly. If the platform it shall adopt shall be in accordance with its earlier antecedents, if the party shall have the courage and its maturity which it possessed and displayed in its infancy, if it shall express its determination to vindicate the honor and integrity of the Republic by stamping out the fraud, injustice, and violence which makes elections in the South a disgrace and scandal to the Republic, and place a man on that platform with a clear head, a clean hand, and a heroic heart, the country will triumphantly elect him. If it, however, should fail to elect him, we shall have done our duty and shall still have under us a grand party of the future certain of success. I do not forget that there are other great interests beside the Negro to be thought of. The civil service is a great interest. Protection to American industry is a great interest. The proper management of our finances so as to promote the business and prosperity of the country is a great interest. But the national honor, the redemption of our national pledge to the freedmen, the supremacy of the Constitution in the fullness of its spirit and in the completeness of its letter over all the states of the Union alike, is an incomparably greater interest than all others. It touches the soul of the nation, which against all things else should be preserved. Should all be lost but this, the nation would be like Chicago after the fire, more prosperous and beautiful than ever. But what I ask of the Republican Party requires no sacrifice or postponement of the material interests of the country. I simply say to the Republican Party, those things ye ought to have done, and not to have left the others undone, and the present is the time to enforce this lesson. Time has come for a new departure as to the kind of man who is to be the standard bearer of the Republican Party. Events are our instructors. We have had enough of names. We now want things. We have had enough of good feeling, enough of shaking hands over the bloody chasm, enough of conciliation, enough of laudation of the bravery of our Southern brethren. We had tried all that with President Hayes, of the purity of whose motives I have no shadow of doubt. His mistake was that he confided in the honor of the Confederates, who were without honor. He supposed that if left to themselves and thrown upon their honor, they would obey the Constitution they'd sworn to support and treat the colored citizens with justice and fairness at the ballot box. Time has proved the reverse of all this. And this fact should cure the Republican Party of adopting in its platform any such soft policy or any such candidate. Let us have a candidate this time of pronounced opinions, and above all, a backbone. There's been no show of federal power in the borders of the South for a dozen years. Its people have been left to themselves. Northern men have even refrained from going among them in election times to discuss the claims of public men or the wisdom of public measures. They have had the field all to themselves. And we all now know just what has come of it, and the eyes of the leaders of the Republican Party are, I trust, wide open. Mr. James G. Blaine, after all, as well as before he failed of his election, pointed out the evil which now besets us as a party and a nation. Senator John Sherman knows full well that the solid South must be broken, that the colored citizen must not be cheated out of his vote any longer, and that the Constitution must be obeyed in all parts of the country alike, that individual states are great, but that the United States are greater. He has said the right word, and said it calmly but firmly in the face of the South itself, and I thank him and honor him for it. I am naming no candidate for the presidency. Any one of the dozen statesmen whose names are in the air, and many whose names are not, would suit me and gain my best word and vote. There is one who has not been named, and not likely to be named, who would suit me, and who would fulfill the supreme demand of the hour, and that man is a Southern man. I refer to the Honorable John M. Harlan, Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, who, true to his conviction, stood by the plain intention of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, in opposition to all his brothers on the bench. The man who could do that in the circumstances in which he was placed, if made President of the United States, could be depended upon in any emergency to do the right thing. But, as I've said, I'm not naming candidates. The candidate of the Republican Party will, in all the likelihoods of the case, be my candidate. I am no partisan. I have no ambition to be the first to name any man or make any man obliged to me for naming him for the high office of president. Other men may do this, and I have no disposition to find fault with them for doing it. If, however, John A. Logan were living, I might name him. I am sure he would not allow himself to be trifled with, or allow the Constitution to be defied or trampled in the dust. I have faith also in Roscoe Conkling, whose dangerous illness we all deplore, and whose recovery we profoundly and anxiously desire. With such a man in the presidential chair, the red shirt and rifle, horseback and tissue ballot plan of South Carolina and the Mississippi bulldozing plan would receive no encouragement. I am, however, not here to name men. My mission now, as all along during nearly 50 years, is to plead the cause of the dumb millions of our countrymen against injustice, oppression, meanness, and cruelty, and to hasten the day when the principles of liberty and humanity expressed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States shall be the law and the practice of every section, and of all the people of this great country without regard to race, sex, color, or religion. Washington National Republican, April 17th, 1818, the year of our Lord.